Hi, this is Linda from Remade with Love, and today we're making a dog biscuit tin for our counter. So don't throw out those old Christmas or Boy Scout tins. They kept your popcorn fresh and they'll keep your dog treats crisp in a beautiful container. I'll add a list of what I've used in the remarks for this video, so if you'd like to make one like I did, you will know all the things you need to have. You'll need to have some cute stencils. I used a dog paw along with some alphabet stencils so I could put the dog's name on the tin. You'll also need some paint. I'm going to be using Amy Howard's chalk paint in Ballet White, a nice neutral white that has a little bit of warmth to the color. And you'll notice that I'm just using a pint. I'm opening that up and taking a small amount on. A little bit of this chalk paint goes a long way. It's so good in coverage. Make sure to thoroughly clean your surface, and then this chalk paint will adhere to the tin. I use Clean Slate to make sure any dirt, grease, or adhesives are removed. After shaking this small amount of paint vigorously for about 30 seconds, go ahead and apply using a 3-inch nap paint roller. I try and get the same texture throughout, and I don't want any brush strokes. So this nap roller is one way to avoid having lines or brush strokes on your tin. And as you can see, as I'm trying to use that roller everywhere to get the same results, it's just not working on this small space. So I'm going to have to break down and use a flat artist brush. You might have noticed that I'm painting the tin lid while it's on the tin. It's a great way to get the tin areas, the tiny little areas, covered without smudging. But I'm also thinking about if I'm going to paint the tin and the lip underneath, or if it'll turn out to be too thick once I have all the paint on. So I'm just kind of stalling and trying to figure this one out. At this point, I'm not too concerned about the brush strokes in this area. It's such a small space, and as long as I just don't have globs of paint that are left over, everything's going to be evening out. This paint is a good self-leveling paint. Okay, so I'm going to speed this up. And after completely painting that tin lid, it dries in about 20 minutes. You can see that although I thought I had great coverage, by the time it dried down, you can actually see that bright red and green and cream colored design underneath. So I go ahead and I'll give it another coat on top. And next I'll paint the sides and the rims with the same chalk paint. I've decided to paint all the way to the top, to that top lip of the tin. And if I have trouble opening or closing it, I'll sand off the paint just from that tiny little rolled rim that sticks up. That's really the tightest spot, the one that gives it its seal. And I'm just really concerned that if it's being used daily and all that on and off, that the paint, if I kept it underneath, one, it would either be too thick and I'd have trouble opening and closing it, or two, it would chip with being so thick. So I just want to be aware of that. But I also looked at this tin and I thought, it is not a neutral tin. I went ahead and chose something that had some bright colors to it, and I just couldn't leave that space underneath that wasn't painted. So if you notice at the very top, it is kind of a silvery rim. If I do decide it doesn't fit right, I'll go ahead and use some sandpaper and just sand that tiny little rim apart. And again, like the first coat, I noticed that things were showing through. I went ahead and put a second coat on the main portion of the tin and a third coat on the top. And there you go. Now, can't wait to use my stencils. They're both mesh and stick and hold in place. So I just need to cut them apart and decide where the design will go. I've decided on this dog paw, and at first I think I'm going to put it on the top, and then it doesn't quite feel so right. So I end up putting it on the side and going, yeah, dog paw, and then the dog's name. That'll work. Now I pretty much eyeball the lettering where it should go, but in the past when I've done stenciling, especially on cups or mugs or a round surface, what I end up doing is using painter's tape and using that as a line. I either run it around the rim at the top or the rim at the bottom, and then put my stencil edged up against that. But in this case, I went ahead and thought, oh, I can eyeball this. The first two letters go super well, but I probably should have used that tape because the second P, the third letter, was at a slight angle and didn't look right at all when I completed his whole name. And so rather than get upset with myself, I just painted over that P in the middle of the name and redid it again. I did end up using measuring it and getting it straight, so I was super happy with how it turned out. Then I just wanted to add that dog print. I wanted to kind of get a feel for where everything was going. And because they're separate stencils, I wanted to not spend my whole day doing this. So I put the first two letters on, the dog paw, and here we go. Now I'm using black chalk paint for the name. And I just loved the idea of how the black would pop against the softer color, and then the brown for the dog print will go ahead and be a more subtle look. Because it's on an off-white color, I didn't want it to be so harsh, black and black and this off-white. So black for the name, brown for the paw print. Notice I'm using a chalk spreader here, and I'm using chalk paint. So I get a little bit on the end of my spreader, like you're putting toothpaste on a tooth brush, but just a little tiny bit. And a little bit goes a long way. And I spread it at a 45-degree angle, pulling it and scraping it across, pushing the paint into the mesh part. And look how crisp and clear that comes out. It's one of the reasons why I love, love, love mesh stencils. That, and if you get this into a bath of water immediately after you use it, it's going to come clean and you can reuse these letters over and over again. Now for the dog paw print, I'm using the brown, like I said. And this brown chalk paint turned out to be a little bit more thin, and so I thought I'll use my stencil brush. And it didn't quite work out. So you get to learn from my mistakes here. I started pouncing and I noticed, okay, even though I'd kind of this was the first time I was using this for pouncing. I had cleaned it. I had pulled at the bristles to make sure that the hairs were all stuck in, and it was just not a great brush. So disappointed in the brush, and then disappointed that I couldn't pounce this in right. So I ended up almost painting it in. And again, you're going to learn from my mistake here. I should have used the chalk spreader. A mesh stencil is made to have the paint pushed and pulled through it. That stickiness on the back is going to stop any paint from going through and spreading anywhere it shouldn't go. So really use the chalk spreader. You'll notice as I pull up the stencil, the paint did not go through all the way. So I had to touch up. Again, I used my flat artist brush and little bits of brown paint. And, you know, like I said before, we can always fix things. So we just have to fix it rather than have it come out cleanly the first time. And had I used the chalk spreader, I probably would have gotten the same results as I did with the letters, which were perfect. Touching up by freehand wasn't so bad, but it's just more time consuming. And I think it's still so super cute. So I finished putting on the letters, and the paint dries in about 20 minutes. So this is good for a rainy afternoon or a couple of hours downtime or crafting when you just need to get away and be creative. And here's my result. One less tin in the trash and one cute way to store the dog biscuits. I'll definitely be doing this again, maybe for my sewing notions. And since this tin will be used daily with the lid on and off, I sealed with 2 light coats of matte sealer to protect it from chipping or smudging. And if it gets dusty or dirty, I can just wipe it down with a damp cloth. If you enjoyed this how-to video, please follow me at Remade with Love on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.